What if the most powerful AI company in the world isn't OpenAI? It isn't Google. It isn't even Microsoft. What if it's the company sitting quietly in your pocket right now? Because here's what nobody is talking about: Apple has been playing a completely different game. And by the time everyone realizes what they've been building, it might already be too late. Welcome back to iProfit Insights, the channel where we break down exactly how the world's biggest smartphone companies make their money, dominate their industries, and stay one step ahead of everyone else. Today, we're going deep on one of the biggest questions in tech right now. Will Apple dominate AI? Not just participate in it. Not just compete. But actually own it, the way they own smartphones, the way they own music, the way they own tablets. By the end of this video, you're going to understand Apple's real AI strategy, why it's completely different from what everyone else is doing, how it connects directly to Apple's billion-dollar business model, and whether this is the smartest play in tech history, or Apple's biggest risk yet. Let's get into it. Let's go back to November 2022. ChatGPT launches. The internet explodes. Everyone loses their mind. Suddenly AI is everywhere, in the news, in boardrooms, on every tech channel on YouTube. Google panics and rushes out Bard. Microsoft pumps billions into OpenAI. Startups are raising hundreds of millions of dollars overnight. And Apple? Apple says almost nothing. No dramatic announcement. No emergency press conference. No CEO going on CNBC to promise they'll revolutionize AI forever. Just silence. And people started to panic. Tech journalists wrote pieces asking whether Apple had missed the AI wave. Analysts questioned whether Tim Cook had lost the plot. Some investors genuinely started to worry. But here's the thing about Apple that most people forget every single time: Apple never moves first. They move right. Think about it. Apple didn't invent the MP3 player. But the iPod changed music forever. Apple didn't invent the smartphone. But the iPhone changed the world. Apple didn't invent the tablet. But the iPad defined what a tablet should be. Apple watches. Apple waits. Apple studies what works and what doesn't. And then Apple comes in and does it better than anyone thought possible. So the real question isn't whether Apple missed AI. The real question is, what has Apple been quietly building while everyone else was busy making announcements? And the answer to that question is worth hundreds of billions of dollars. Here's what most people don't realize about Apple's AI strategy. Every other company in this race, OpenAI, Google, Meta, Microsoft, they are all fighting for the same thing. They want you to use their AI assistant. They want you on their platform, in their ecosystem, generating data, clicking ads, paying subscriptions. Their AI lives in the cloud. Their AI needs your data sent to massive server farms thousands of miles away. Their AI is essentially a service you rent. Apple is doing something completely different. Apple is building AI that lives on your device. AI that doesn't need to phone home to a server. AI that processes your information right there on the chip inside your iPhone or your Mac. Private, fast, and deeply integrated into the hardware Apple already sells to over 2 billion active users around the world. This is called on-device AI, and it's not just a technical achievement, it's a business strategy of absolute genius. Let's break down why. You know Apple Silicon? Those M-series chips in the MacBooks and the A-series chips in the iPhones. Apple has been designing those chips specifically for AI workloads for years. The neural engine, that's the part of Apple's chip dedicated to AI processing, has been in every iPhone since the iPhone X back in 2017. 7 years of quietly building the AI infrastructure that now makes everything else possible. Think about that for a second. While the rest of the world was just discovering AI in 2022, Apple had already been embedding AI hardware into hundreds of millions of devices for half a decade. That's not being late to the AI race. That's 7 years early. Now let's talk about money. Because this is iProfit Insights, and we don't just talk about what Apple is building, we talk about why it's worth billions. In 2024, Apple officially announced Apple Intelligence. And at first glance, it looks like a bundle of cool new features. Writing tools. Image generation. Smarter Siri. Priority notifications. Summarization. All of that. And yes, those features are genuinely useful. But the business model underneath those features is what makes this absolutely fascinating. Here's how it works. Apple's fastest growing revenue segment isn't the iPhone. It's services. Apple Music, iCloud, the App Store, Apple Pay, Apple TV Plus, the services business is now generating over $100 billion a year. It's pure profit compared to hardware. It has higher margins. It grows even when iPhone sales slow down. And Wall Street loves it. Now ask yourself, what does Apple Intelligence do for the services business? Everything. When your iPhone gets smarter, you use it more. When you use it more, you buy more apps, subscribe to more services, store more in iCloud, pay for more storage. Apple Intelligence makes every service Apple offers more valuable and more sticky, meaning you're less likely to ever leave the Apple ecosystem. But here's the shocking part. Apple also struck a deal with OpenAI to bring ChatGPT directly into Apple devices. Now, some people saw this as Apple admitting defeat, as if they couldn't build their own AI and had to borrow someone else's. But that framing completely misses what Apple actually did. Apple integrated ChatGPT as an option, not a default. And they negotiated hard. When you use ChatGPT through Siri on your iPhone, your data is protected. Apple holds the relationship. Apple controls the interface. And critically, Apple is in a position where any AI company, OpenAI, Google, whoever, would pay enormous amounts to be the default choice on 2 billion Apple devices. This isn't Apple losing the AI race. This is Apple turning AI into a bidding war where Apple collects the toll. Let's talk about one of Apple's most underrated competitive advantages in AI. And it's something that can't be easily copied. Privacy. Now, I know what you're thinking. Privacy sounds boring. Privacy doesn't sound like a revenue strategy. But stay with me here, because this is one of the smartest long-term business moves Apple has ever made. Every time you use Google's AI, every time you use Meta's AI, every time you talk to a cloud-based assistant from any major tech company, your data travels to their servers. It gets processed. It gets stored. It potentially gets used to train future models, serve you ads, or analyze your behavior. That's the fundamental trade-off of cloud AI. You get the intelligence, they get the data. Apple flipped this equation. With on-device AI, your messages, your photos, your emails, your personal context, it never leaves your phone. Apple built something called private cloud compute for the cases where more processing power is needed. It's a system where your data gets processed on Apple's servers, but in a way that Apple itself cannot see, cannot store, and cannot access. Independent security researchers can verify this. It's not a marketing claim. It's architecture. And here's why this matters for the business. There is a growing segment of users, and it's growing fast, who will pay a premium to not be the product. Professionals, executives, healthcare workers, lawyers, parents, people who have real reasons to want their personal information to stay personal. Apple is building an AI product that specifically serves these people. And these people are willing to pay. Premium AI features require newer devices. Newer devices cost more. The iPhone 16 Pro and Pro Max, the ones with the full Apple Intelligence feature set, start at over $1,000. Privacy isn't just a feature. Privacy is a reason to buy the most expensive iPhone Apple makes. This changes everything about how you should think about Apple's AI strategy. Okay, let's be honest for a minute. Because this video would not be complete without addressing the elephant in the room. Siri is not good. I mean, we all know it. You know it. I know it. Apple knows it. For years, Siri has been the butt of tech jokes. Ask Siri a complex question and half the time you get a web search result. Ask Siri to do something requiring actual reasoning and the whole thing collapses. Compared to ChatGPT, compared to Google Gemini, compared to Claude, Siri has been embarrassingly behind. And this is Apple's biggest problem in the AI race. Because here's the thing, your AI assistant is your face. It's the thing users interact with. It's how people feel about your AI strategy. And for years, Apple's face has been a confused, frustrating, limited assistant that couldn't even reliably set a timer without asking a follow-up question. Apple knows this. That's why the Apple Intelligence announcement was specifically designed to rebuild Siri from the ground up. The new Siri is supposed to understand context across your apps, remember previous parts of a conversation, take actions on your behalf, and plug into ChatGPT when it needs more horsepower. But here's what makes this such a fascinating business story. Apple's AI ambitions don't actually depend on Siri being the best chatbot. That's not the game Apple is playing. Apple's game is integration. Apple's game is the ecosystem. Think about it this way. If you use an Android phone, you probably have Google Assistant or Gemini as your AI. But it doesn't know your health data from your Apple Watch. It can't read your iMessages. It doesn't have your payment history from Apple Pay. It can't see your photos in your iCloud library. It can't access your notes, your calendar, your contacts, all of that living in Apple's ecosystem. Apple's AI doesn't need to be the smartest AI. It needs to be the most connected AI for the people who already live inside Apple's world. And with over 1 billion active iPhone users, that's a population larger than most countries on Earth. When your AI knows everything about your life because your life is already organized inside Apple's apps, that's a moat that OpenAI can't cross. That's an advantage that Google can only partially replicate. And that ecosystem advantage compounds with every year that passes. Let's get into the actual money, because the financial implications of Apple's AI strategy are genuinely staggering. Apple's revenue in fiscal year 2024 crossed $400 billion. $400 billion. The iPhone accounts for roughly half of that, hovering around 50% of total revenue. But the services segment, which we talked about earlier, grew to become Apple's second largest revenue source, generating over $100 billion annually with operating margins that analysts estimate are somewhere around 30 to 40%. Now here's where AI enters the financial picture. AI features require new hardware. The full Apple Intelligence experience requires an iPhone 15 Pro, an iPhone 16, or newer. This is not an accident. This is a calculated upgrade cycle strategy. Here's how it plays out. Users who want the AI features, and surveys show that a significant portion of iPhone users are genuinely curious and interested, those users have a reason to upgrade their devices sooner than they otherwise would. The average iPhone replacement cycle has been stretching out to about 4 years. Apple Intelligence is designed to pull that cycle tighter. Even if Apple Intelligence shortens the upgrade cycle by just a few months across hundreds of millions of users, the revenue impact is in the billions of dollars. Then there's the services angle. Apple Intelligence is expected to drive increased adoption of iCloud Plus subscriptions because the AI features work better when your data is in iCloud. More storage subscriptions. Higher tier plans. More monthly recurring revenue. And then there's the premium tier conversation. There's significant speculation, and this is worth watching, that Apple could eventually introduce a paid tier for advanced Apple Intelligence features. A monthly subscription for the most powerful AI capabilities on your Apple devices. If Apple charged even $10 a month and captured just 10% of their active user base, that's $1 billion a month in high-margin subscription revenue. The market is watching this space very closely. Let's zoom out and look at the full landscape. Because Apple isn't competing in a vacuum, and understanding the competition helps us understand what Apple's real strategy actually is. Google has Gemini. And Google's AI is genuinely impressive. Google has been an AI research company for over a decade. DeepMind. TensorFlow. Years of language model research. Google has real AI talent and real AI products. And critically, Google is embedded into Android phones, into search, into Gmail, into Chrome. Google has its own ecosystem, and it's enormous. But Google has a problem. Google's entire business model, over 70% of their revenue, comes from advertising. AI that gives you direct answers threatens to reduce the number of searches users perform. Fewer searches means fewer ads means less revenue. Google is literally being challenged to disrupt itself, and the tension inside the company around AI monetization is something that industry analysts have been writing about for years. Microsoft has poured tens of billions of dollars into OpenAI and embedded Copilot into everything: Word, Excel, Teams, Windows. For business users, for enterprise customers, this is genuinely powerful. But Microsoft's focus is the enterprise. It's the corporate world. It's productivity software. Apple's focus is personal. Apple's AI is about your life, not your spreadsheet. Meta has been investing heavily in its own open-source AI models. Llama, their model family, is powerful and is being deployed across Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. But Meta's business model, like Google's, runs on advertising. Meta needs your data. Meta's AI is designed to keep you on Meta's platforms. The privacy proposition is fundamentally different. And then there's Samsung and the Android world more broadly. Samsung launched Galaxy AI features in the Galaxy S24 series. They partnered with Google for Gemini integration. They're making real moves. And Samsung's global market share, particularly in Asia, in Europe, in developing markets, means they cannot be ignored. But here's the key insight. Samsung is building AI on top of Android, which is Google's platform. Every AI feature Samsung builds ultimately strengthens Google's ecosystem as much as Samsung's own. Samsung doesn't control the full stack. Apple controls everything. The chip, the operating system, the hardware, the software, the services, the distribution. The entire vertical stack from silicon to the app on your screen. No other company in consumer tech has that level of control. And in AI, where performance depends on how well hardware and software work together, that vertical integration is an almost insurmountable advantage. Now here's something that most AI discussions about Apple completely overlook. And it might be the most important factor of all. China. Apple generates roughly 18 to 20% of its revenue from Greater China. That's somewhere between $70 and $80 billion a year from a single market. And in China, Apple is facing serious pressure on multiple fronts. First, the AI front. China has strict regulations about where data can be processed and what AI features can be offered. Apple Intelligence, in its current form, cannot be offered in China under existing Chinese law. The features that Apple is rolling out to American, European, and many Asian market users are not available to Chinese iPhone buyers. In a market where Huawei and local Android brands are rapidly gaining ground with their own impressive AI features, this is a significant competitive disadvantage for Apple. Second, the competition front. Huawei made a dramatic comeback. After years of American sanctions crippled their chip supply, Huawei surprised everyone by launching phones with advanced chips again, apparently developed domestically. Their Mate series became a symbol of national pride in China. Chinese consumers who might have bought an iPhone began looking at Huawei as a real alternative. Third, the regulation front. The Chinese government has been scrutinizing foreign tech companies more closely than ever. Apple has navigated this carefully for years, sometimes controversially, removing apps from the Chinese App Store at the government's request. But as AI becomes central to the iPhone experience, the regulatory balancing act becomes even more complicated. How Apple solves the China AI problem, whether through local partnerships, data localization agreements, or some entirely different approach, will be one of the defining challenges of the next 5 years. And the financial stakes could not be higher. Here's the part that most people miss when they are comparing AI announcements and chatbot benchmarks. Apple is not trying to win the AI news cycle. Apple is trying to own the next decade of computing. Let me explain what that means. Right now, the dominant paradigm for using AI is typing into a chat box. You open an app. You type a question. You get an answer. This is genuinely useful and genuinely impressive. But it's also if we're honest, still a pretty primitive way to interact with intelligence. The future that Apple is building toward is different. It's a future where your devices understand the full context of your life, your relationships, your habits, your calendar, your health, your finances, your creative work, and proactively help you navigate all of it without you having to ask. Your iPhone doesn't wait for you to type. Your iPhone knows. That's what Apple Intelligence is the first version of. It's rough. It's limited. It doesn't fully work yet. But it's the foundation for something that, if Apple executes well, could redefine what a personal device means. And the business implications of that are almost impossible to overstate. If your iPhone becomes genuinely indispensable, not just convenient, but actually life-organizing and irreplaceable, then switching to Android doesn't just mean getting a different phone. It means leaving behind an AI that knows you, understands your context, and has been learning your preferences for years. The switching cost becomes enormous. The lock-in becomes nearly permanent. This is why Apple doesn't need to have the best AI model. Apple needs to have the most embedded AI. The AI that's hardest to leave. Apple has been building the world's most sophisticated hardware-software services ecosystem for 20 years. AI is not a new chapter for Apple. AI is the full expression of everything Apple has been building toward. But let's be fair. Let's talk about the scenarios where Apple's AI bet doesn't pay off. The first risk is execution. Apple Intelligence was announced with significant fanfare, but the rollout has been slow and uneven. Features that were promised have arrived late. Series intelligence improvements have not been as dramatic as users hoped. If Apple can't deliver on the promise, if Apple Intelligence remains a set of incremental improvements rather than a transformative experience, the narrative flips. The stock suffers. The competitive ground shifts. The second risk is regulatory. Governments around the world are looking at AI with intense scrutiny. The European Union has already been the most aggressive regulator of big tech in the world. If regulators decide that on-device AI gives Apple unfair advantages, or that Apple's integration of AI into its operating system constitutes anti-competitive behavior, the same way they've scrutinized the App Store, Apple could face forced changes to how it deploys AI. The third risk is the best-in-class problem. If the gap between Apple's AI capabilities and the competition's AI capabilities becomes too wide, users notice.